Alright guys, so earlier today I was out at a coffee shop and I was scripting out some new videos for the channel this week, and I realized I haven't done a beginner film photography tips video in a very long time. And so we're going to be doing one right now, and we're going to be talking about 10 tips I wish I knew when I first started shooting film. So if you're just getting started and you don't know where to start, or maybe you're thinking about starting shooting film, this video is for you. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Alright you guys, tip number one, buy your film camera from a reputable source. Now the reason why I say this is because you're going to see a lot of videos online, especially on my channel, where people go out to thrift stores, buy cameras, or they go to garage sales, or maybe they just order them off eBay. And for the most part, you can get some pretty nice deals on cameras, but they're not going to be guaranteed to work. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. These are film cameras from 20 years ago, maybe even more, maybe 30 to 40 years. And so a lot of people who are selling online maybe just found it in their mom's storage, and they're just selling the camera without even knowing if it works or not. So my recommendation to get your first film camera is to go to a reputable source, whether that be an in-camera camera store. Like for example, if you are in San Francisco, I would highly recommend you guys check out Glass Key Photo, or somewhere like Through the Looking Glass Photo in Berkeley, California. This way, if you're buying a camera from an actual camera store, most of the time they have already CLA'd the camera, they've done repairs and maintenance to it, and they can kind of give you a push in the right direction as to how to use the camera and what you need to know. If you do a quick little Google search online, I guarantee you there is a photography shop that sells film cameras in your area, so definitely check that out. But the second option would be just to go off of like KEH, which is an online camera store, and most of the equipment they sell is in good working order. They will tell you down there in the description or in the details. But always do your best to see if you can find it from a reputable source. Ask them straight up, does the camera work? Does it need any work done to it? This way, when you receive your camera, you can focus more on shooting rather than worrying about repairs or anything of that nature. So that is the first tip. Buy your camera from a reputable source. Tip number two, you guys, is to upgrade your lens before your camera body. Now you may have heard this in the past before, but all film cameras are essentially the same. They might have different features, like one might have a faster max shutter speed than the other, or maybe there's a light meter in one of them, but at the end of the day, it's just a black box that holds your film. Speaking purely of image quality, the camera body does not play a role in how the overall image looks and how sharp it is. The factor that plays a role in sharpness and image quality is going to be the lens, and most of the time when you're getting started with a brand new film camera, the lens that they provide isn't always going to be the greatest. So if you are looking to buy a new piece of gear to get better image quality, I would highly recommend you guys do your research and buy quality glass. Tip number three, learn the difference between different ISO film stocks. Now, when you look at a 35mm film, it'll have a value number on each of them. Now, each of these values are what we call our ISO. Now, ISO basically determines the sensitivity of light that film is rated at. Typically, you'll have 100 ISO, 200 ISO, 400 ISO, and 800 ISO. Now, focusing just on those main four, 100 ISO is going to be the least sensitive to light. So the smaller the number, the least sensitive it is to light, which means you need to shoot that with more available light. So 100 ISO films, generally you typically want to shoot that on a bright sunny day. 400 ISO is in the middle. So you can shoot this film in bright daylight, overcast, or even in some darker situations. And at the very end of that spectrum, you have 800 ISO film, which is going to be the most sensitive to light. So you can photograph with this ISO during the nighttime when there is less available light. So once you learn the different ISOs, you can really avoid making the mistake of shooting in 800 ISO film in bright daylight and completely overexposing every one of your photographs. All right, you guys, now tip number four is to learn basic exposure. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, ladies and gentlemen, when you are shooting film, you need to have your exposures down. Most film photographers, when they first start, they rely mostly on their light meter, but as you progress as a film photographer, you're going to want to learn how to manually expose your film, and you can use methods like Sunny 16 or learning the exposure triangle to see the different relationships between each of the values. Learning manual exposure through any of these methods is an absolute great skill to have, especially when you have a camera that doesn't have a built-in light meter. You'll be able to look at the light that's available and input your settings based based off of the knowledge that you've learned using these different systems. So that is tip number 4, you guys. Check out different videos on YouTube on learning manual exposure, Sunny 16, or the exposure triangle. Tip number 5, you guys, is buy fresh film. Now, many of you guys probably don't know this, especially if you are just getting into film photography, but you can buy expired film. After the expiration date, the film starts to lose its sensitivity to light, and then you start to get these weird color shifts, and it goes down a rabbit hole. Now, even though you can shoot expired film, if you want to get good results every single time, you guys, buy your film fresh and shoot it fresh. Tip number 6, get your film developed at a trusted professional lab. The days of drugstore film developing are over. I highly recommend you do not step foot into a drugstore to get your film developed for a number of different reasons. 1, they don't give you your negatives back. 2, they only give you 4x6 prints back. And 3, usually they send it over to this mass produced film lab, and their quality isn't always on point, and so you end up getting subpar results from your film. And you always want to get good results, especially when you're shooting and spending a lot of money on your film. Now, there are a ton of different online labs that you can send your film to that can develop your film for a really reasonable price. My favorite being the Darkroom Lab, based out of San Clemente, California. They do a great job with quality scans as well as really quick turnaround times, and you guys definitely check them out in the description below. If you guys want to get your film developed, check out the Darkroom Lab. They're not paying me to say this, I'm just saying they are just my favorite lab, my go-to film lab. Tip number 7, buy your film in bulk when you can. Now, the reason why I say this is because the prices of film are always going up. Now, when I say buy your film in bulk, I'm talking about buy maybe 2 to 3 rolls at a time, not buying like 100 of them. But usually if you find a good deal on film, it's probably always gonna be in bulk, and you can save a lot of money just buying it now for that price before the prices shoot up again. So definitely buy your film in bulk. You could definitely save a little bit of money. Tip number 8, you guys, store your film in a cold and dark area. Now, you may or may not have heard this before, but film photographers, we store our film in the refrigerator, sometimes in the freezer. Why is that? Well, simply, folks, if you cold store your film, it slows down the degradation of film when it goes past the expiration date. Cold storing your film essentially just keeps it nice and fresh. Tip number 9 has to do with your camera, and that is, don't forget to change your ISO between rolls. I've seen this many times before. Somebody put in a fresh roll of 100 ISO film, they finished it, then they got a roll of Portrait 400, put it in here, and they shot the entire roll, and then they realized at the very end their light meter was still set to 100 ISO. And in trade, they pretty much overexposed all of their photos by 2 stops. They come back with a blank roll, and the rest is history. So you guys, you want to make sure you change out the ISO on your light meter, whether it be in camera or on a physical hand meter, before you change your rolls. A lot of people will take a little snippet of the box that the film comes in and they'll put it back here. As a matter of fact, that is why these film cameras have these little squares here. You can slip in a little tab here what film you're shooting so that you won't forget what film you have in there. And last but not least, you guys, tip number 10 is to keep your negatives. Now, a lot of you will go out and get your film developed, and then you'll get the scans back, and that'll be the end of it, and you'll just end up tossing the negatives. The reason why you probably shouldn't do that is because, 1, your scans are digital files, and digital files can be lost at any given time. Keeping your negatives, especially even just archiving them and putting them into a binder with all of these 35mm sleeves, can save your butt. If you somehow get a really beautiful photograph from film and then you end up losing the scan, you can always refer back to the negative itself, and you can get that rescanned, and you will have your image again. Also, saving your film is about 50% why you do it anyways in the first place. It's a physical copy. You know, you're actually taking your negatives, and you can inspect them, you can clean them, you can scan them, you can do whatever you want to it. But that's gonna wrap it up for my 10 quick tips that I wish I knew for beginner film photographers. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section down below what tips you guys have for new film shooters, what you would recommend they do, or if you have any other things to add, leave those in the comment section down below. But I'm gonna wrap it up here, you guys. I'll see you in the next one. As always, Minolta Gang.